Still in Africa, where Uganda has officially suspended all military cooperation with Germany, accusing the German ambassador, Matthias Schauer, of engaging in subversive activities.
On May 25th, Uganda shocked the world by cutting all military ties with Germany. No warning, no debate, just silence and a sudden break. The reason? A shadowy accusation that Germany's ambassador was meddling in Uganda's affairs. But what did he do? And why now, just months before Uganda's next election? Let's find out. It didn't begin with a press conference. There was no televised announcement, no diplomatic back and forth. Just a crisp official statement from the Uganda People's Defense Forces, UPDF. All defense and military cooperation with Germany had been suspended, effective immediately. The date was May 25th, 2025. The world was caught off guard. But in Kampala, this decision had been building quietly and dangerously for weeks. At the center of the statement was a single, unnerving phrase: subversive activities. The UPDF claimed it had received credible intelligence implicating Germany's ambassador Matthias Schauer in dealings with unnamed hostile pseudo-political and military groups inside Uganda. No further details, no proof made public. But in the world of national security, you don't need court evidence to act, just the perception of a threat. The military's tone was unapologetic. The language wasn't diplomatic, it was blunt, even defiant. And while the statement didn't name Germany as a whole, the message was clear. Uganda no longer trusted the man Germany had sent to represent it. As far as Kampala was concerned, that alone was reason enough to shut the doors. For Uganda, the move was drastic but deliberate. Unlike past disputes with Western nations, this wasn't an argument over aid conditions or election monitoring. This was the military, not the foreign ministry, taking the lead and issuing the order. And that matters. Because when the armed forces speak first, it signals something more serious than routine political tension. It suggests that Uganda's security establishment saw Schauer's presence as not just inappropriate, but dangerous. The suspension wasn't time-limited. There was no timeline for review, no proposed path to reconciliation. The UPDF made it clear, cooperation would only resume once the situation was fully resolved. And what might that resolution look like? No one said. Would it mean Schauer's quiet departure from Uganda? A formal apology from Berlin? Or would Germany push back? Germany did push back, but not with force. Berlin immediately dismissed the claims as absurd and without merit. Officials in the German Foreign Ministry called the accusation baseless and emphasized that their ambassador had done nothing wrong. But in Uganda, that denial only deepened suspicions. To Kampala, this wasn't just about one ambassador. It was about whether foreign powers respected Uganda's right to set boundaries. By all accounts, the military's decision was not made lightly. Defense cooperation with Germany had been a cornerstone of Uganda's post-2000 modernization. From military medical training to technical exchanges and peacekeeping logistics, the partnership had practical value on both sides. Uganda stood to lose real benefits, and still, it acted swiftly, as if something irreversible had already taken place. It's also worth noting what didn't happen. There were no statements from Uganda's foreign ministry clarifying the UPDF's position. No alternative diplomatic channels were used, no attempt to de-escalate. That silence from the civilian side of the government was telling, and led observers to believe this decision had backing from the highest levels of power. It wasn't just a military maneuver, it was a political message, and the timing couldn't be ignored either. The suspension came in the run-up to Uganda's 2026 general elections, an already tense period marked by increased security crackdowns and mounting scrutiny from international observers. With opposition figures being arrested and protests clamped down, Kampala had grown hypersensitive to what it sees as Western interference. In that context, even a diplomat's private comments could be seen as sabotage. So, was this really about Matthias Schauer? Or was he just the spark in a powder keg already full of suspicion, power struggles, and nationalistic pride? What's clear is that once Uganda pulled the trigger, it didn't look back. And for a country long used to walking a tightrope between East and West, this felt like the moment it chose sides. But what was actually at stake in this relationship before it collapsed? Let's pause for a second to say, Big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. To truly understand the weight of Uganda's decision to suspend all defense ties with Germany, we need to move beyond the headlines. This wasn't just about halting a few meetings or canceling a training session. Uganda didn't just shut a door. It dismantled a multi-layered military relationship that had been built silently, steadily, and with immense strategic value for both sides. For nearly 2 decades, Uganda and Germany maintained a low-profile, high-impact partnership rooted not in weapons sales or flashy defense deals, but in specialized military support, capacity building, and cross-border peacekeeping frameworks. The cooperation was discreet, but its architecture was sophisticated. One of the most crucial pillars of this partnership was medical defense collaboration. Germany, known for its advanced military medical capabilities, had long worked with Ugandan forces on combating tropical diseases, battlefield surgery, trauma care, and epidemiological crisis response. At Bombo Military Hospital, Ugandan and German military doctors often worked side by side in confidential joint programs that dealt with not just battlefield casualties, but broader regional health crises like Ebola and cholera. This wasn't charity, it was strategic preparedness. Uganda, positioned at the heart of East Africa, is a logistical hub in one of the world's most volatile regions. From the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo to South Sudan and Somalia, Uganda's military has been repeatedly called upon to intervene, stabilize, or lead. That meant Germany's medical investment wasn't just about Uganda, it was about regional resilience. Losing that pipeline now leaves a void that won't be easily filled. Then there was training, another vital gear in the machine. German officers were instrumental in advising Ugandan units on military law, rules of engagement in peacekeeping missions, and disaster response protocols. For a military force like the UPDF, often stretched thin across both internal insurgencies and external missions, access to European training models was invaluable. These were not flashy boot camps or parade rehearsals. They were deeply technical courses in military ethics, chain of command management, and hybrid warfare strategies. Germany also provided technical cooperation in cybersecurity, radio communications, and encrypted field medical data systems, areas often overlooked but essential in modern military operations. That made Germany less of a symbolic ally and more of a back-end systems provider, enhancing the UPDF's operational efficiency in subtle but essential ways. Peacekeeping operations were perhaps the most geopolitically charged component of the relationship. Uganda remains a key troop contributor to the African Union's transition mission in Somalia, ATMIS, a complex high-risk operation meant to counter al-Shabaab and stabilize the region. Germany doesn't send troops to the mission, but it does fund it, train parts of its support infrastructure, and coordinate with regional actors through the EU framework. That makes Uganda's break not just a bilateral issue, it could have wider implications for the regional security architecture. Trade wasn't left out of the picture either. While not directly part of military cooperation, defense diplomacy often spilled over into business diplomacy. In 2024, trade between Germany and Uganda crossed $335 million, spanning machinery, medical equipment, vehicles, and infrastructure planning tools. Many of these goods supported or indirectly enabled military logistics and administrative modernization in Uganda. It was the kind of relationship where civilian trade and defense support were interwoven, and separating them now may prove far more complicated than anticipated. So, when Uganda pulled the plug, it didn't just cancel a training program. It ripped out a technical lifeline that had become quietly embedded in its military fabric. But what's most notable is how calmly and confidently it did so. Why? Because this wasn't just a technical decision. This was a political act, driven by personalities, pride, and a growing resistance to perceived foreign interference. The machinery of cooperation may have been German, but the control switch was now firmly in Ugandan hands. And the man standing behind that switch? He wasn't a diplomat. He was a general, a son, and a very controversial figure. To understand why this partnership crumbled, we need to examine the man who turned a diplomatic misunderstanding into a full-blown collapse. Behind every collapsed alliance is a story not just of politics, but of people. And in the case of Uganda and Germany, the breakdown of military ties wasn't ultimately decided in a meeting room. It unraveled through a silent clash of egos, brewing between two men who represented very different worlds, General Muhuzi Kainerugaba and Ambassador Matthias Schauer. General Muhuzi isn't just Uganda's military chief, he's the biological son of President Yoweri Museveni, the country's long-standing ruler. Over the years, Muhuzi has become far more than a soldier. He's evolved into a political wildcard, a digital warrior who blurs the lines between military protocol and online populism. With a social media presence unmatched by any African general, he regularly posts controversial opinions, mocks opposition leaders, and even hints at future presidential ambitions. For Western diplomats, Muhuzi's behavior has been a growing concern. While he commands respect in Uganda's military circles, his Twitter-fueled provocations have raised eyebrows abroad. And this is where Ambassador Schauer enters the frame. According to multiple diplomatic insiders in Kampala, Schauer had become increasingly vocal, albeit privately, about Muhuzi's rhetoric and the militarization of Uganda's political space. Though no official statements were issued, it's widely believed that Schauer, in several closed-door meetings with other European diplomats, raised objections about the general's tone and behavior, particularly in the lead-up to the 2026 elections. That's where the lines blurred. In Uganda's current political climate, any criticism of Muhuzi, whether spoken in hushed tones or formal declarations, isn't just a policy concern. It's a challenge to the throne, and Muhuzi took it personally. In an unprecedented move, General Muhuzi responded, not through formal channels, but by publicly targeting Ambassador Schauer, branding him wholly unqualified to represent Germany in Uganda. He didn't frame it as a political disagreement. He framed it as an insult to the state. And once Muhuzi draws that line, the machinery of the UPDF follows it without hesitation. The conflict, in many ways, was less about foreign policy and more about dignity. Muhuzi, as both a general and a symbol of succession, couldn't afford to be seen as weak or criticized by a foreign envoy, especially not in an election season, and especially not by a representative of the same European power bloc that many in Uganda now see as condescending and neo-colonial in tone. Schauer, on the other hand, may have underestimated the deep-rooted nationalism now shaping Ugandan governance. His diplomatic instincts, drawn from decades of European engagement rules, likely assumed there was room for behind-the-scenes critique, soft diplomacy, and mutual understanding. But Uganda's political reality in 2025 isn't run on whispers, it's run on assertion. And Muhuzi made the assertion crystal clear. What makes this fallout even more unique is how quickly it escalated beyond repair. In the past, similar tensions between African governments and Western ambassadors have simmered for months, sometimes years, without leading to full diplomatic rupture. But this time, Muhuzi didn't let it simmer. He moved swiftly, and by allowing the military itself, rather than the foreign ministry, to issue the suspension, he made sure the message came directly from his domain. In effect, Uganda didn't just freeze Germany out, it reinforced that the balance of power within the country has shifted decisively toward the military elite, with Muhuzi at its core. And in that context, diplomacy isn't conducted through protocol. It's conducted through dominance. With the feud now public, the cooperation suspended, and Germany's ambassador politically isolated, one truth became impossible to ignore. This wasn't just a diplomatic disagreement. This was a declaration. And now that Uganda had made that declaration, the world was left asking, was this about one ambassador, or was it part of a much bigger campaign to push the West out entirely? If the clash between General Muhuzi and Ambassador Schauer was the spark, the political climate in Uganda was the fuel. The sudden breakdown in Uganda-Germany defense ties didn't happen in isolation. It was the loudest symptom yet of a growing, deliberate campaign to recalibrate Uganda's relationship with the West. A campaign that's accelerating as the country barrels toward its 2026 general elections. To understand the gravity of what's unfolding, consider this. Uganda's next election is not just about who wins the presidency, it's about who controls the country's future narrative. And in that battle for control, foreign diplomats are no longer being seen as neutral observers. They're seen as liabilities, watchers, potential meddlers. Over the past year, Uganda's government has grown increasingly combative toward Western criticism. European Union envoys have raised alarms over reports of police brutality, illegal detentions, shrinking civic space, and targeted repression of opposition leaders. Human rights watchdogs have issued damning assessments of press freedom and political intimidation. But these reports don't land softly anymore. They land like insults. For Uganda's ruling class, particularly those in military or dynastic circles, foreign critique is being reinterpreted as foreign interference. That framing isn't accidental, it's strategic, and it's becoming the cornerstone of a new nationalist political discourse, one that says, only Ugandans have the right to shape Uganda. That slogan plays well in rural constituencies where the memory of colonial intrusion still lingers. It plays even better in military circles, where foreign lectures on democracy and reform are often viewed as veiled attempts to weaken African sovereignty. And it resonates loudly among Uganda's elite, who are preparing for a high-stakes power transition, possibly even from Museveni to Muhuzi. As this nationalist mood intensifies, diplomats like Shower have found themselves walking a dangerous tightrope. Say nothing, and risk being seen as complicit. Speak up, and risk being labeled a foreign agent. In such an environment, even a closed-door concern about electoral fairness or military neutrality can be interpreted as an attack on national stability. This climate has also birthed a dangerous precedent: militarizing diplomacy. Uganda's foreign relations are no longer being mediated strictly through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Increasingly, they're being shaped, sometimes dictated, by the military. The UPDF doesn't just defend the state anymore. It defines the tone of Uganda's external posture. That explains why the decision to suspend Germany came not from the Foreign Office, but from the army itself. It's also no coincidence that this tightening is happening now. Uganda is less than a year away from elections that are already shaping up to be more volatile than any since 2006. The opposition is fragmented but still resilient. Civil society organizations are trying to mobilize despite new restrictions. And whispers of Muhuzi's possible presidential run are growing louder with each passing week. In this tense pre-election atmosphere, the ruling establishment has begun closing ranks, legally, politically, and diplomatically. New laws regulating NGOs, cyber surveillance crackdowns, arrests of independent journalists, and revised voter registration policies all point to one truth: Uganda's leadership is preparing for a contested season, and it's preparing to control the terrain completely. And this is why Germany's ambassador became such a lightning rod. Whether or not Shower said or did anything provocative is, in a sense, beside the point. In a system that now sees observation as intrusion, any foreign presence with too much curiosity becomes a threat. Diplomats are being repositioned in the national imagination, not as friends or allies, but as potential spies, narrative shapers, or soft power agents. This doesn't mean Uganda is heading toward full isolation. Far from it. The country is still pursuing international trade, still engaging in multilateral forums, and still cooperating with global partners, just on very different terms. The new policy isn't cut off the West, it's cut off the West's leverage. That includes moral leverage, diplomatic leverage, and even developmental leverage. In that context, suspending military ties with Germany wasn't just a response to one man's actions. It was a warning shot to every foreign embassy in Kampala: adapt to the new rules or prepare for consequences. Do you support this decision? Was it a mistake on Ghana's part? Or do you think it was much needed? Let us know in the comments section. Does Africa need help from Germany anymore? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.